Hello and welcome to Euphoria. In this video I'll be continuing my series on the design and build of a LEGO modular building. This is going to be a large office building and research institute. Today I'll be looking at the procurement phase, in which I obtain all the LEGO elements I need to build this MOC and get ready for the build itself. I'm very clear now about how this MOC is going to look and how it will be built. In the early stages of the project, I had the initial inspiration and ideas, developed the concept and looked at various options. I've then completed 3 phases of design, so that I now know exactly what this MOC should look like when it's finished. So now I've completed the design, I can come on to the last 3 phases. These are the procurement phase, the build phase and the review phase. So here I'm going to look at the procurement phase for this MOC. In summary, the main stages are making the parts list, checking the list for part availability and price, or any duplicate or similar parts, deciding where to source and selecting suppliers such as LEGO or Bricklink, purchasing, that is placing orders or otherwise buying the parts I need, receiving and checking orders, then checking and updating what's left to buy, and finally preparation for the build itself and making instructions if necessary. So the first step is deciding what to buy. During the design process, I actually decided to split the design into 2. One part for the structure and one part for all the fittings and details. This means I have 2 lists of parts to purchase. I did that because I wanted to concentrate on obtaining the parts for the structure. The parts for the fittings and finishes, while important to the overall model, are secondary to the structure. The parts list for the structure hasn't changed much for quite some time, even with slight changes to the design, because the type and colour of parts is largely the same. But there are several thousand parts just for the structure. The parts list for the fittings and other details is more recent, because I developed the details later in the design process. It has introduced a lot more types and colours into the design, and it's changed more rapidly as I thought about the details. Also, when looking for parts for the fittings and details, I can be more opportunistic, such as using different colours, finding different printed tiles, or discovering suitable minifigs. I do have some flexibility with the fittings. For example, it doesn't matter if I don't have a specified minifig, whereas I have to get the right parts in the right colours for the main structure. It's worth pointing out that I've used Studio to develop this MOC, but one weak area of Studio is the relatively small number of printed or stickered parts or readily available minifigs that it has in its system. So they couldn't be in the CAD model. I did add some placeholders, such as black minifigs, but I found that these confused the purchasing process, so mostly I had to remove them. And I've had to look for suitable printed parts during the procurement phase. This is quite a large model, both in terms of size and the number and type of parts that I need. There are over 3,900 parts just in the structure itself, and those are of 283 different types and colours. But there's a lot more variety in the parts needed for the fittings and details, with over 1,000 parts, but over 300 different types of parts and colours, including a few types of printed parts, but actually excluding the minifigures. So finding and ordering the parts for the fixtures and details has in some ways been more complicated than buying the parts for the building itself. Occasionally I used a part in the design that isn't available in a certain colour. But mostly I avoided this mistake during the detailed design process by checking part availability as I went along. If I did make this mistake, then I usually corrected it by changing the type of part rather than changing the colour. I've shown some examples of this in my previous videos on procurement. A major part of the procurement phase is working out the best place to buy the parts I need and ordering them. For this project, I'm getting my parts from 5 sources, buying LEGO sets that contain parts relevant to this MOC. In this case, I started out by buying an example of set 76166, Avengers Tower Battle. Actually, I bought a set without any of the minifigs from someone breaking the set, and this was a lot cheaper than buying the whole set. I bought a few pick-a-brick cups from the pab wall in LEGO stores. This provided some of the parts I needed, but it was never possible to buy exactly what I needed in this way. I bought quite a few parts from the pick-a-brick service on LEGO.com. This was before the changes to the way that the pick-a-brick and bricks and pieces services worked. For some of the time, pick-a-brick was not available on LEGO.com, which was very disappointing. It has been difficult when LEGO part ordering is not available or takes a long time, but I see that the service is now coming back in its new form. I bought many of the parts from Bricklink stores, mostly in the UK. To keep costs down, I did buy some used parts, and I've been selective about buying from stores that sell very good condition or nearly new second-hand parts. Stores do vary in the treatment of used parts, so I've avoided parts that have heavy playwear or are discoloured, broken or distorted. And I'll be using parts that I already have in stock if possible. In this video, I'm not going to describe the mechanics of buying. There are other videos on my channel that already describe the process, including using parts lists, selecting stores, finding parts on LEGO.com, making shopping carts and so on. There are also several videos on my channel describing purchases as I made them, and many of those include parts for this project. If you do want to see more detail on the ordering process, see my previous procurement video for my other MOCs, such as my old astronomical clock tower MOC. There are several thousand parts just for the structure of this building. Fortunately, I've been collecting parts for this MOC for some time, because I started early with the structural design. As I was changing the design, it did mean that I ended up with some of the wrong parts, or more than I need of some types. But I've been able to spread the cost, take advantage of special offers, get some of the parts from the pick-a-brick wall, where they're generally much cheaper, and take advantage of LEGO VIP points, including double VIP points offers. Some parts were more expensive than I expected, but I was able to get many of the parts I needed at a discount, or at least with VIP points when buying direct from LEGO. When orders are delivered, I unpack them, I sort them out and check them over to make sure that what I ordered has been delivered. Then I put the relevant parts into the project trays for this project. Obviously, if I'm ordering parts for another project as well, then they go into trays for the relevant project. Or Where I buy parts that are not for a specific project, I'll just put those parts into stock. So, having completed most of the procurement, this is what 5,000 parts looks like. As you can see, I've sorted them into project trays so that I can easily get to the parts I need during the build. But the sheer volume of parts for this build sort of overflowed my tray system. Here I have the hundreds of dark blue parts for the main structure of the building. Here I've got a whole tray of transparent parts for the external window panels at the front and back of the building. They'll mostly fit into all these frames. There are loads of plates in dark tan, which I'll use for building the floor plates, and lots of other parts that I need for the build. There's also a tray of parts for all the fixtures and fittings and details that will go inside the building and on the roof. I've also managed to procure loads of minifigs that will populate the building. I'm just going to take a quick look at the minifigs that I've obtained for this MOC. In the last video I showed you the minifigs and accessories that I want to use from the Space Research and Development People Pack. This set provides a variety of interesting minifigs and activities to populate the labs in the building. But, as I said earlier, the minifigs for this MOC weren't really represented in the parts list. So I've obtained minifigs during the procurement phase that I think will go well with this MOC. And I've also got some minifig parts, such as heads, hair and legs, that I'm going to use to make some modified and customised minifigs. I won't go through all these minifigs now, but if you're interested, just let me know in the comments and I'll show you a separate video. The other part of the P phase is planning and preparation. I need to find time and space to actually undertake the build. It might be frustrating having to wait to start, but that's probably less frustrating than starting, then realising I don't have a certain part and I can't proceed with the build. Ideally, I would also like to make instructions for the build. I did do some instructions for one of my other MOCs, and I found that very useful, especially for things like complex floor patterns, but I also found it very time consuming and rather error prone. I'm hoping that the construction of this MOC will be fairly straightforward, so I'm going to try building from the CAD model on the screen rather than try to devise a complicated set of instruction steps. So that's the procurement phase finished. This is quite a large MOC and there's quite a lot of detail, so it's taken me a while to obtain everything I need to finish this off. Now that I have all the parts, I can finally move on to the exciting part of actually building this MOC. But that will be the subject of the next video in this series. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to make sure you don't miss any of the updates on this project, or indeed any of my other MOCs or my LEGO City.